Okay, good morning. My name's Rennie Stein. For those of you who are listening, know that's my name anyway. All right. We thank Hashem for our ability to learn and help bring Mashiach now, not to mention the fact
Right.
that it helps us become better Jews and better shluchim for the benefit of the world. That's
Right.
actually like a new introduction. All right. I personally thank Rabbi Smith for giving me the opportunity to teach and therefore prepare and learn more on my own. Good morning, Moshe. I just see it turned on. Okay. We learned for Shalema, for Rabbi Smith's father, whose name I just had here a moment ago, is Rufa Shlema for Guf for Tzvi Levi ben Miriam Edel, and for our colleague Naftali ben Menucha Bela, and for my son who needs a continuous Rufa Shlema, Oriel Gabriel ben Rachel Chaya, and everybody else who needs Rufa Shlemas, and the hostages that is still in Gaza or elsewhere, just bring them back alive. In the meantime, give them a force shleim for us, and that's the goof that they should survive that and then survive it later on. Oh, and all that other jazz we can think of. All right, so let's go. We're on. I want to try and do a page and a half because we're several pages behind. So, hang in there with me. Uh, We're on 65A down by the thick lines on the bottom, the third thick line towards the left, the last three words, Hasoches Echamol. All right? Hasoches Echamol Aviala Yayin. Nesech, Yayin Nesech, Charo Asur. So you have a donkey service. We've had this case before. You're running a car service. And an idol worshiper comes along and says, I want to hire your donkey because I want to transport my Yayin Nesech, my idolatrous wine. Let's just call it Nesech wine from now on, make it easier. From place A to place B. All right, guess what? You might do it, but then you can't keep any of the money because it's prohibited to you. You can't have any hana benefit. So even though you're not drinking Nesech wine, you'd be benefiting by making a living, by making money from it. You can't do that. The Gemara asks, Hatu Lamali, why do I need this additional case? You taught me that already. So what are you bringing this case for? Haina Resha. It's essentially the same as the Mishnah's first case concerning a worker's wage. That's how we started off for the other day. Sefer Itzrach, the Gemara explains, Sefer Itzrach lay, it is the Mishnah's final ruling that is needed as follows. If he hired the donkey in order to ride on it, so he wasn't hiring the donkey for the transport of Nesech wine. He was hiring your limo service to sit in the back. That's all. He said, hey, I'm paying you, take me interstate from Florida all the way up to New York. All right, it's a long ride. He says, I don't want to drive. I'm going to ride in the back. Okay, even though the idol worshiper placed his flask of nesech yain on the donkey, or in this case, let's say he took out a bottle and he put it into the trunk, scharamuta. Its fee is permitted for benefits. All right, you're allowed to still you rent him, or in this case, let him hire your service. Why? Because he's hiring it for transporting him, or for him renting your car or renting your donkey. The fact that he went and happened to put some Nesach wine on the side, all right, should not really negate it, and that's what the Mishnah was teaching there. There's a Jewish comedian that's very well, I won't say that. The Gemara assumes this is to mean that one who hires a donkey is not permitted to place his flask upon it. The Gemara actually asks, "Lamema, the lugging love dinahu la osfei." Does the Mishnah mean to say that it's not the renter's right to place the flask on the donkey? All right, because there's no, he rented it for transportation purposes, so why can't put that renewal? But contrast this with the teaching of the following brisa. So let's now bring the brisa. When who hires a donkey? Soche menir halak suso leginoso mezunosov show also a derech. So the renter may place on the donkey his clothing, let's say his flask of yayin nesach, and other provisions for entire journey. All right, let's look. You're paying for a plane ticket. All right, and in your carry-on luggage you have tuna fish cans and salami and maybe some stale like bread, let's say matzah and other stuff. Why? Because you know where the kosher joints are out where you're going, and you want to just have enough provisions for you for the week, whatever, something like that. Typical Jewish story, right? He says, beyond that, if he wishes to load even more baggage onto the donkey driver may prevent him from doing so. The same thing is you want to bring too much food onto the airplane. They say, I'm sorry, this is beyond the carry-on. You're going to have to pay for this. This is going in the baggage compartment. Chama miniach aleh sorin v'teben nosav shel also ayam. The donkey driver may place upon the donkey barley and straw for his own provisions for that day. All right. So the guy who owns it, who's driving the flying the plane, or the interstate truck driver, all right, or the guy who's running the Uber, the Juber, all right, he takes food for him for just one day, right? Because he's used to stopping. He has to stop for gas. And every time he stops, he's going to look for a gas station. Eventually, he'll find a gas station. It's not so easy. That's open, all right? That'll have a quick mart in there, and he'll pick himself some food. Or even more, he'll find himself Chabad that's in that stop because Chabads are everywhere. Okay, and he'll pick himself up some good kosher food.
Join him for bringing.
What?
Join him for bringing.
Join him for bringing even. No, he's on the clock. Beyond that, if he wishes to load further provisions onto the animal, the renter may prevent him from doing so. So the owner the Jewish owner who's rented this vehicle, whatever way it is, to whether it's a donkey or whatever, to the non-Jew, all right, the non-Jewish person who's an idolater, he can say, hey, you can take your one day's provision because, you have to drive for at least a day's worth before you stop to fill up for gas. But you can't take more. Don't fill up my van for what you need. All right? I'm sorry, Josh said it right. This price states the one who hides a donkey is legally entitled to place his flask upon it. That's what it says. This contradicts the ruling of our Mishnah. So we keep on asking these questions. Hang in there. The Gemara answers, Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Nehi delogin dina hudus de osuve. Oops. Granted, it is the renter's right to place his flask upon the donkey if he hires it. Mia ilo mosivle. However, if he does not place it upon the donkey, miamrinan le naki le agra deliginose liginoso. Do we say to him, deduct a portion of the fee that's for the flask? That's where the joke came in. I was listening, and there's this hysterical Jewish comedian. He makes fun between how Sfadim handle things and Ashkenazim and all kinds. He's just a very funny guy, Jews and non-Jews. And he was talking about a Jew. I think it was a Sephardi, I can't remember his name. He says, and he goes into listen to a comedy club, and he says he looks how much they charge for the ticket. And he says, this is so much for the ticket. He says, you got to listen to what he does. He says, can't you charge me a little bit less? And they go, that's the price of the ticket. He goes, well, can you tell a few less jokes and then charge me less? It's like that's the kind of thing here. Hey, if I don't bring luggage in my rent-a-car, will you charge me less? Hey, you're renting the car. Whether or not you put stuff in the trunk is irrelevant. There's a cost for renting the car. So, of course not. You can't deduct a portion of fee that's for the flask. There's no portion of fee that is contingent upon using the donkey for this purpose or the, what do you call it, the trunk use. Therefore, he receives no reduction. Likewise, then, in regard to permitting its benefit, since the fee is not given for the right to transport the nesach wine, it's permitted for benefit. Okay, and that jives with what we learned yesterday, that where the guy was being paid for a day's work to move barrels or smash barrels, and at the end of the day, he had already earned his fee, and then the idolater said, "You move one last barrel for me," and he was permitted. It didn't deduct from his fee. Why? Because it had nothing to do with his fee for which he was paid for. And if it happened during the day, yes, then at that point, if he spent an hour doing that, he wasn't allowed to benefit from it. That was yesterday's learning, and he couldn't benefit. Having cited the Brisa, the Gemara examines its ruling. Hechi dami. What's the Bryce's case? If they are traveling through an area where provisions are readily available for purpose, Chamanami Lakev, then the donkey driver should be able to prevent the renter from burdening the animal with provisions. Makes sense. He says, hey, I can stop at any time and you can pick up extra food or even whatever you want. And if it's an area where provisions are not readily available for purchase, then the renter too should not be able to prevent the donkey driver from loading on enough provisions for the entire journey. Sounds like a good question. Hey, if it's difficult to get food in these places we're traveling through, why are you preventing the owner, the Jewish owner, from taking more than a day's worth of food? So the answer is, in what case did the Brisa rule that the renter may carry provisions for the entire journey, while the donkey driver is allowed only a single day's provision? We're looking to explain a little bit better that. Hi, Chaim, I just noticed you're on. The Gemara clarifies the Brisa's case. Rav Papa said, lo tzricha. No, the Brisa's ruling is relevant in the case to sheach, lemitrach, lemizban, meyavna, la'avna, where provisions available for one who is willing to trouble himself and purchase them from one day's journey to the next day's journey. I had mentioned this earlier. All right, so this guy who does he transports from Florida, New York, Florida, California. He takes a day's worth of food with him each time because he's going to have to stop for gas. And then we stop for gas. He knows certain gas stations may be closed, this and that. Chabad never sleeps. He'll go off. The guy he's renting to, he's sleeping in the backseat of the limousine, or he's sleeping on top of the donkey. He'll go out of his way and he'll get what he needs. With regard to a donkey driver, is his practice to trouble himself and purchase food each night. Therefore, he may place upon the donkey no more than a single day's provisions. So we just explained what I said earlier. With regard to the renter, it is not his practice to trouble himself and purchase food each night. Therefore, he's allowed provisions for the entire journey. Think of it, you're going on vacation for a week, you're going to a convention, you typically pack food for yourself because you don't want to start worrying about, is there a Chabad house? Is not a Chabad house? How much I pay? What do you, what?
Oh, the donkey driver does that every day, so he knows
Right.
the spots.
Well, no, but they might be closed. He doesn't mind going out of his way to do it because the guy it's not affecting the guy in the back. That's okay, you're following. I want you to know we have 10 people here in this room, but only one person is always asking the question. Hillel. I'm joking. Hillel's the only one here. Thank you for being here, Hillel. I'm talking to a room of empty chairs, but at least we got half a dozen almost people online. The Gemara recounts an incident concerning work performed with Nesach wine. Avodah the Rav Acha Bered Rav Ika. The father of Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika. That's really funny. The father of Rav Acha, the son of Rav Ika. Why don't you just say Rav Ika? You know, because that's who's going to be asking the question. All right. So what does he say? Next page, I think. All right. He would pour wine into the wineskins for idolaters. Right. This next page, 60. Oh, no, we're still not up there. We're at 65B only. Oh, all right. And then he would go and ferry the wineskins across the river, delivering them to the buyers. The idolaters would then give him the earthenware barrels in which the wine was originally contained as his wage for transferring and transporting the wine. So once again, this Ravika, he had earthenware barrels filled with kosher wine. And he would carry them across the river for a fee to idolaters waiting on the other side. Don't frown, just understand. To the other side of the river. The wine that's in his earthenware barrels, they're kosher. There's nothing wrong with that wine. There's nothing wrong. This is why I'm understanding. Or with his flasks, all right? The thing is, he would pour that wine into wineskin flasks for the idolaters. The original earthenware, even though the people, the idolaters who bought this wine and technically paid for transportation and technically might have paid for the earthenware. They don't need the earthenware. They just want the wine because they're going to use it for Yayin Nesach. But when does it become Yayin Nesach? It only becomes Yayin Nesach once they take their flask and then plan on using it for Yayin Nesach. Remember, don't tell me, just listen. And if I'm wrong, then afterwards you read me what it is. Because think of when we were learning about making wine when they were going up and down with their feet, and maybe there was an idolater whose hands were tied behind his back, whatever it was, in the vat originally, that wine was not considered wine yet. Only when it finally ended up in the cistern was it considered wine. And only at that point could it become Yain Nesach. That's analogous to the situation here. We're not dealing with Yain Nesach yet. Exactly. All right.
So just like that, the wine only becomes prohibited when it touches the bottom of the idolater's flask.
That's what I just said. Well, it doesn't become, then it becomes the potential for Yain Nesach. Right. Now you got it, right? Also, Amrei Le Abaye. So people came and said to Abaye about this. They asked a question. All right. They faulted Ravika for working with forbidden wine. They felt he was working and getting benefit from Yayin Nesach. Amar lahu, Abai said to them, Kikak Tarach. When Ravika did the work, when he poured the wine into wineskins, Batera Tarach, it was prepared wine that he was working, permitted wine. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't Yayin Nesach wine. It was kosher wine. So he didn't perform any work with forbidden wine. The Gemara questions Abai's vindication of Rav Ika. But even after the wine became prohibited, Rav Ika decided its continued existence, that is, that the wineskin should not split. So forcing him to use his barrels to save the wine. So they're saying, but wait a minute. Once he poured it into the Yayin Nesach, this is what was throwing you off, into the wineskin, into the animal skin barrel flasks, then it would become Yayin Nesach as far as the idolater was concerned, because that's when he's used it. And what if all of a sudden those flasks started to break? Then he'd say, oh, I got to say this, otherwise they're not going to pay me for the wine, and he's going to pour it back into his earthenware barrels, which he had brought across the river. And now we have a problem, because now he has Yayin Nesach in his barrel, which he can't benefit from. Not only that, but it means also that he all along was thinking of the continued existence. Hey, don't do anything, don't break, don't crack, nothing until they take it off my property. And he would benefit from the continued existence of the wine. And we learned the other day that is not allowed. Although we learned also in what situations it is. All right, that the wineskin should not split. And we're going to, so why then did Abai sanction the practice? Because Abai said, no, it's okay, Rav Ziki said. So we're going to explain. The Gemara explains, the Maslei Bahadu, Rav Ika would stipulate with the Abai. There was a stipulation here. It's, in this clause, that even if the wineskins would split, he would not be obligated to use the barrels to save the wine. And so he says, you are paying for my transport of wine across the river to be poured into your wineskin flasks. All right. Upon receipt of the wine into your flasks, the deal is over. I owe you nothing. I benefit from nothing. The deal is sealed. You have paid for it. He therefore had no stake in the continued existence of the wineskins and their contents. This is what I'm telling you. Hatzachayim, hold your horses, okay? Inami. Alternatively, my wagon driver, he doesn't know how to hold the horses. He just knows how to go ahead to the next question. It's okay. When I let you give this share, all right, because I'm going to be wiped out, then you feel what it feels like to be in trying to catch up. The pages were behind. It was supposed to be, I think, at 68, what 65 be. The Maiso priest, Dike Bahad Yehu. The buyers would bring empty vessels with them, into which they would save any spilled wine. So these guys, knowing that this clause was in the deal, they came prepared with second vessels, just in case their initial vessels broke, they would be able to salvage the wine. Since there was no chance that the original barrels would be used, because Ravika covered that with a clause. Ravika had no vested interest in the wineskins remaining undamaged. Therefore, he did not desire their continued existence. Therefore, he made the money fair and square. The Gemara asks further, but how come Abed me'aber lehu mi'abara? But we still have the question. But when he ferried the wine across the river, the Katarach Bisura, and he was working with prohibited wine, which is forbidden. Well, first of all, I thought we just said it's not prohibited when he's ferrying across the river. So did they mean when the ferrying? So I'm going to read this comment. The Gemara argues that by ferrying the by then forbidden wine across the river, Abika was violating Torah prohibition against Rugmanesach wine. So I guess he poured the wine into the flasks initially before he went across. It would appear, because they're saying it was prohibited wine. And it only becomes prohibited once it was poured in the flasks. So it sounds like he came to the river, then he took his, if I'm understanding this right, he took his barrels, he poured it into the flasks. At that point, this stuff is Yain Nesach, and he ferries it across, but he has no further, he's finished his day rate, he got paid, and therefore anything incidentally moved my barrel, there was no more benefit to him, because he got paid for what he had to do, even though the ferry still had to float across the river, or something like that. The Gemara explains that Ravika did not transport the wine himself. That's a great way of getting out of this. Because he told the ferryman beforehand. So now we learned something. He was in charge of all the ferry services, right? He was a harbor master, all right? So he would tell the ferryman beforehand, ferry his buyers across the river. In other words, he never got involved with that stuff. They would be on this side of the river. They'd come. They'd say, hey, we want to buy your kosher wine. We needed $5 purposes. But maybe they didn't tell that, but that's what they were going to do with it. So he poured the wine. That's it. The deal was over. He said, so he didn't ferry it himself. The other ferry masters, they ferried it across the river, because the deal was, hey, you want to use my harbor, you want to use my river, all right, you have to ferry these idolaters with their wine. So he did not ferry the buyers himself, and he didn't get paid anything extra for that. He was not considered to be working with the forbidden wine. That's one answer. Another answer, inema, alternatively, dinkite be kitre, the buyers held specifically knotted ropes. So how did the ferrymen know who these idolaters were, that they weren't going to get paid, but they had to take them across the river? They had special knotted ropes, all right? Like they had their own looking garter or bracelet or whatever it is, or the ropes that sailors use, all right? And they would, carry it around. But they had a way of identifying themselves, which then identified themselves to the ferryman. At any rate, Ravik himself did not take them across. Okay, further, new Mishnah, or at least a statement from the Mishnah. If a nesach wine fell onto grapes, he should rinse them off with water or the like, whatever he has, and they're permitted. Now, we're talking about grapes that they're still on a bunch of grapes. They're still attached by their stems. They have no cracks. They're full grapes. So anything that falls on them can be washed right off them. It won't penetrate them. Unlike a bottle let's say, where you go and you take all the grapes off the stems ahead of time and you put them into a bowl. So, and maybe they're a little bit old and they're uh, cracked, and therefore uh, the wine will go either into where the stem was or into the crack. That would be a problem, he says. So this situation is permitted. But if they were cracked, asuras, then those grapes would be prohibited. Nafal gabi tainim or gabi tamarim. Mishnah says, what if the fine wine fell into figs or into dates? Im yesh bem no same time, if there is enough wine in them to impart its flavor to them. In this case, we're talking about a good, tasty flavor. Also, it's prohibited to eat them. Umasa, and now umasa biyatos ben zunan shevi grogozos bisfina. And there was an incident involving both this Ben Zunan, who brought dried figs on a ship. Nishtabra chavis, shalyan nesach v'nafal gabein, and then a barrel of nesach wine broke, and it spilled onto these dried figs. V'shalach chachamim v'tirum. So they asked the sages, hey, can we eat these figs? It was when they came over, wine nets brought them. And they permitted them. So what's the rules at Klal? Whenever the flavor imparted by the substance is to one's benefit, it's prohibited. But if the flavor, you don't like this flavor, it's not to one's benefit, then it is permitted. Because the guy really doesn't want that. He's going to do his best to keep on washing that off, right? Higan chamech nafal agabe grisen, such as the case of vinegar that fell onto split beans. Gemara asks, all right, in other words, nobody would like that. Marcel Listor, does the Mishnah cite an incident to contradict its ruling? The Gemara answers, Chasure Mechsura Bachi Katani. No, what's happening is the lacuna in the text. We're missing a portion of the Mishnah. And this is how it should have read. If the Nesach wine imparts a taste to the detriment of what would have been permitted food, the permitted food is still permitted. Now we're repeating this, and there was an incident with this Biyasa, this guy's name, who was bringing dried fruits, figs on the ship. We're repeating this again. The Nesach wine flask happened to break and spilled onto them. And the incident came before the sages, and they permitted them. The Gemara relates an incident. Okay, now another one. Okay, I want you to think about something, but I'm going to wait a while. Ahu kri dechite denafo aleha chavite deye nesach. There was a pile of wheat upon which a barrel of nesach wine spilled. Shayai Rava lezabune lovde kochavim. Rava permitted to sell the wheat to an idol worshiper. So, because the wheat absorbed the yain nesach and you weren't allowed to eat it, because wheat kernels have kind of cracks in it, he allowed this. And we're going to go into details when these are allowed, when these are on the next page, in case you have any questions. All right. But so even if you're not allowed to eat it or to drink it, like we've had these cases before, you still could sell it and get benefit from that. Rava's ruling is challenged. So we're challenged it. Isfei Rava bar Leva LaRava. So Rava bar Levi challenged Rava from the following brisa. He took a brisa off the shelf. What did he say? Beged Shavit Bo Kalayim. If a thread of Kalayim was lost in a garment, so a guy had a wool garment, and all of a sudden a piece of linen from something else was missing, and somehow it's hidden in this kind of furry-looking wool garment. So what are we saying? We're saying that garment is now shatnez, but we don't know where it's shatnez because it's got mixed wool and linen. You can't sell that garment anymore to a non-Jew idolater. Why? That's one thing. Mardas lechamor, and you can't make it into a saddle blanket for a donkey. About also so tachwich mitzvah, but you can make it into tachwich and shrouds for an unattended corpse or any corpse in general. Love the kochavi my nama tamalo. Now we're gonna ask questions. What's the reason I can't sell it to Klayim Shatnez, to an idol worshiper? He's allowed to wear it, so why can't I sell it to him? He says, he might go and then sell it to a Jew who's non-suspecting, doesn't really, says, this is 100% virgin wool, doesn't realize 100% wool, not made by a dressmaker, made by a tailor, that the garment contains kilayim, that was for you, Chaim, contains kilayim, and who unwittingly violate the prohibition against wearing kilayim. So, you don't want to, lifnei evil otitche and milsho, don't put the stumbling back before the blind. If you sell it to the non-Jew who's allowed to have it, but he might sell it to a Jew, then the Jew will end up unwillingly buying shatnez and wearing it. That's not good. Here too, in the case of wheat, upon which the nesach wine spilled, since it's not visually discernible that the wheat contained nesach wine, because it gets absorbed into it, it should be prohibited to sell that wheat to an idolater. For he might come and sell it to a Jew, who might use it without realizing that it's tainted with nesach wine. Rava concedes this objection and proceeds with a different permission. Rather than permitted the owner of the wheat kernels to grind them and to bake them, and to then sell them this baked bread. So Rava said, I give you permission to whoever has this wheat, go ahead, grind it up, make yourself challah bread, make yourself white bread, I don't care what kind, make yourself bread and sell it to an idol worshiper in private, not in the presence of a Jew. Why? Because then when this guy, the idol worshiper, is going to try to sell the bread to a Jew, the Jew's going to say, well, I can't buy this. This is pasakum. This is bread that was made by an idol worshiper, because he doesn't know he got it from a Jew. You sold it to him in private. So he won't buy it anyway. So you're not worried about that possibility. Good. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, what we learned earlier, that if the wine falls on grapes, you should rinse them off and they're permitted. Again, these are grapes that's still in the cluster. But if they're already off the cluster, open at one end or cracked, they're prohibited. Of course, so now the Mishnah states that when the grapes are cracked, they indeed prohibited, even if they're rinsed, because the nesach wine seeps through the cracks into the grapes and they're not permitted, not removed through rinsing. Shame of a cause low. But if they're not cracked, then they are, because you can certainly wash off the nesach wine. Similarly, in Rava's case, when the nesach wine fell into the wheat should be permitted with rinsing. For since the wheat kernels are whole, the wine does not, this is a question, should not penetrate into the kernels. I actually mentioned the answer right. The Gemara answers, Amarav Papa, Shane Chite. Now, wheat are different from whole grapes. Whole va'agav tzirei k'mevukaz damyan. Since on account of their cleft, they're analogous to cracked grapes. Okay. We are now on 66 at the top. Kamratika binvei beinvei. What about case of old aged nesach wine with grapes? Now we're going to get on this page into. Let's make some definitions, and I'm also going to make a comment. We're going to talk about min b'mino, same and same. All right, like and like. It's the same kind of thing. You pour. Give me a name of a wine.
What?
Give me not the type of wine. A dry wine. Cabernet into another type wine. Into
Merlot.
Merlot. I don't know this. I don't drink wines. All right. So it's wine into wine. It's same into same. Okay, so we're going to what? And yayin nesach into kosher wine. It's still same into same. It's wine into wine. So we're going to discuss when it becomes prohibited. What about something that's in Coca-Cola into wine? Yayin nesach into Coca-Cola. Uh, Apple cider vinegar into another type of vinegar, or things that are not exactly the same kinds. Or how do we define when it's prohibited and when it's not? And we're going to see that the general flow is that things that are the same, they're not allowed. We're going to see them, it's a machlokas, but in general, we're going to discuss whether it's not prohibited by mashahu, which is the concept that we have on Pesach, that even a little bit, any amount will make it us, will make it prohibited, or we're applying 1/60th rule. Now, the 1/60th rule, there's a caveat before it that actually, can I really still taste it? If I can't, because if I can taste it, we already said that might be the prohibition right there. But if I can't taste it, then we apply, if it's less than the 60th, there's no taste, then it will be allowed, not allowed. And we'll go into this in detail. Having said that, because that'll make the next Gemara a lot easier to understand, I want you to learn this Gemara. This is my own thing, although I hope it's found somewhere at a totally different level. I always wonder, how's the Gemara going to be learned in Olam Haba? Because we learn it, it would be learned differently. But I'm not going there to learn it right now. That'll be after 180 years. So I want you to say, you know what? Maybe there's a message here. When you're with your own kind, that's safe. Kosher by kosher. Lubavitchers in the Farbrengen. That's fine. When you start mixing with other kinds, beware. It's dangerous. Then mashahu, a little bit, can rub off and really make you unkosher. So it's really important to think about that. But it's, when you're totally with not your own kind, then you already, I'm not really belonging here, this or that. You're on guard. So if nothing's rubbing off on me, then it's no problem at all. I have my own safeguards. I'm being mine. I'm not looking. I'm not hearing. I don't want to speak lashon hara, this and that. But if it's less than the 60th rubbing off on you, it didn't rub off at all. So I want you to think of all these cases of you personally and where you might be, because that's how I relearned the Gemara to myself. And whoa, it totally changed this Gemara for me personally. All right, so let's learn the Gemara. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine, because it doesn't say that in the Gemara. What happens with aged Nesach wine that mixes with grapes? So the first question is wine and grapes the same? Is it min b'mino or is it min she'eno mino? So that might be a machlokas, because is wine and grapes the same? Oh, don't shake your head like this. We all know the answer.
Different bracha.
Listen. Oh, Hillel gives an answer. It's a different bracha. But why? Divrei hakol b'nos and tam. All agree that the Nesach wine renders the grapes prohibited only when it imparts a flavor to the grapes. Now, we said before that a flavor, when we talk about Nos and Tam, we're only talking about not the same. When it's not the same, we talk about do you still get a taste from what it is? Okay, and if you can't taste it, or you apply the 1/60th rule. Chama chadita b'invei. With respect to the new Nesach wine, they're mixed with grapes. Abaya ma b'mashahu. So Abaye says that new wine and grapes, new wine tastes the same as grapes. It was just made. It hasn't aged at all, this or that. So he says it's the same and the same. And the same and the same, we apply the rule of mashal. Even a little bit makes it no good. Abai says that it renders the grape, even though the bracha is the difference. So you can't apply that answer. Right? Abai says that it renders the grapes prohibited in minute concentration. But what does Rava say? Rava Amar B'nosin Tam. Rava says it renders the grapes prohibited only when parts of flavor to the grapes. So again, it depends whether it's a machlokas, whether new wine and grapes is considered min b'mino, same in the same kind, or min shebeino mino, or one kind that's not in the same kind. The Gemara elaborates. Abaye Amar b'masho. Abaye says the new nesach wine renders the grapes prohibited in a minute concentration, basar taman aslinan, for in determining whether two substances are of similar or dissimilar kind, meaning b'mino or b'she'eno b'mino, in its same kind or in different kinds, we follow the taste. If, again, the taste, did you get something out of it? That's the influence. Think about that. If they have the same taste, they're considered to be similar kinds. And this new wine and the grapes have one taste. They have a lane min bibino, so it's considered a kind within its kind. Min bibino masho, and whenever you're dealing with a kind within its kind, the forbidden subset, the nesach wine, renders the mixture prohibited if it's even in a minute concentration. But what does Rava say? Rava Amar B'Nasa Tam. Rava says that the new nesach wine renders the grapes prohibited only when it imparts a flavor to the grapes. Basa Shma Azlinam. For in determining whether two substances are of similar or dissimilar kind, we follow the name. What does that mean, we follow the name? Does that mean, oh, you're a Jew and you're not a Jew? Or you're a Sephardi and you're Ashkenaz? What does that mean here? Does it mean you're a grape and you're a Concord grape? You're a green pepper and you're a, what's that, hot pepper, jalapeno pepper? All right, so we follow the names. If they have different names, they're considered dissimilar kinds. V'hai shma l'chud, v'hai shma l'chud. And this new wine is a separate wine from the grapes. One's called grapes and one's called wine. Therefore, according to Rava, this is a kind mixed with something that's not its kind. And in the mixture of a kind with something that's not its kind, the forbidden substance renders the mixture prohibited only when it imparts a flavor to the mixture. And we will delineate again, I think soon, that it's talking about a favorable flavor. Or we said that already. The Gemara challenges Abaye. Of course, every time we say something, we always challenge it. It's none. We learned in our Mishnah, if nesach wine fell onto grapes and the grapes were cracked, they are prohibited. The Gemara now assumes that the Mishnah refers to new wine that mixed with grapes. My love and nothing, Tom. Now, is the Mishnah not saying that the nesach wine renders the grapes prohibited only when it imparts a flavor to them? And thus the Mishnah contradicts Abaye's assertion that new wine and grapes are considered similar kinds, and that the new nesach wine thus renders the grapes prohibited in minute concentration. This is a question. The Gemara attempts to deflect the challenge to Abaye. Lo b'mashal. No, the Mishnah means that the nesach wine renders the grapes prohibited in a minute concentration. It gets a little confusing unless you write a chart, all right? And that's why, just remember, if you go over this and once and you make a chart, you'll see Abaye and Rava's how they learn things. Make a chart like, Blue Eyes, what was it called, for fruit flies chart. Make min, the mino, min shbeino mino, when it's mashu, when it's a 1 in the 60th note in time, and you follow all this fine. Following it in your head might be hard, but then the third time you learn it, think of it in how does it affect me as an individual. The Gemara reasserts, and if you do that, you're never going to forget this Gemara. The Gemara reasserts its challenge, and if you do forget, what can I tell you? There's no guarantees of when I get here. Kani Sefer, but from that which the end of Mishnah teaches, Zara, this is a general rule. Anything where flavor is imparted by the forbidden substance is to one's benefit. In other words, it tastes good now that it has its extra spice of this other thing. It's to one's benefit. That's prohibited. Kol she'ein b'nasan ta'am mutar. Wherever the flavor imparted by the forbidden substance is not to one's benefit, it is permitted. That's what we learned. All right, we're halfway down the page. I'm never going to make this here. Doesn't Thomas Keenum. So it's implied that we're dealing specifically where the Nessach wine did impart the flavor. No, that's the question, right? As Canadians say no. But by Masnisim become Atika B'invei. And Abai would resolve the difficulty that this poses to his question that new grapes and wine are deemed similar kinds because of their similarity in taste, in which case the wine will forbid the grapes in minute concentration by saying that the Mishnah does not deal with new wine that's mixed with grapes, but rather the aged wine, which specifically is aged Yayin Nesach, and that mixed with grapes. The Gemara now shows how the dispute between Abaye, who considers similarity in kind to be a function of taste, and Rabbah, who considers similarity in kind to be a function of name, also implies in the reverse situation, where the two substances have different tastes but the same name. So we keep on now mixing up the situations and then seeing how Abaye would solve it and how Reva will solve it. That's why I say it gets a little confusing if you're running a chart with a piece of paper and do it later. I'm sure the professor's not here. He would make a chart and he'd have this down claw. Challah b'chamra v'challah d'shikla. Respect to wine vinegar and beer vinegar, and they get mixed. All right? So obviously the question is wine vinegar and beer vinegar the same? They taste totally different. All right? So are they the same because they're both vinegars, or are they different because they have totally different tastes? And one is from wine and one is from beer. Chamira chitiv, chamira d'sheret. Or wheat leaven and barley leaven that got mixed up. Totally different stuff. Abaye ben no tam. So Abaye says the prohibited substance renders the permitted substance prohibited only when it imparts the flavor to the permitted substance. Basa taman Basa tama azlinan, for in determining whether the two substances are of similar or dissimilar taste, we follow the taste. If they have the same tastes, they're considered. If they have different tastes, they're considered dissimilar, means not the same kinds. And this wine vinegar has a separate taste than beer vinegar has a separate taste. So this was the case of min shebeino, a kind that's within or mixed with something that's not of the same kind. And what does he say? And a mixture of a kind with something that's not the same kind, that's prohibited only when it imparts a flavor, a favorable flavor to the mixture. But what does Rava say? Rava Mashal. But Rava says, no, it's prohibited even in the tiniest amount. Why? Basa Shma Azlinan, for in determining whether the two substances are of similar or similar kinds, we follow the name. He goes by the name. It's the name game. And if they have the same name, they are considered similar kinds. So since they were both called vinegars, they're similar. If they're both called wines, they're similar. V'ha chala mikra, v'ha chala mikari. And this wine vinegar is called vinegar, and this beer vinegar is called vinegar. V'ha chamira mikray, v'ha chamira mikray. And the wheat leaven is called leaven, and the barley leaven is called leaven. V'havale min demino, and therefore he considers these all as a mixture within the same kind. V'chol min shemino, and anytime you have a mixture in its own kind, even a little bit of forbidden substance renders the mixture prohibited in minute concentration. Whoa, that's really interesting. So even if you're with your own kind and you're bringing this and that, if somebody brings in something that doesn't belong there, something that shouldn't be heard, something that shouldn't be seen, even a tiny bit, it's prohibited. Tell that guy, no, that doesn't belong here.
No.
Okay, no, right, the Israeli. Abaye supports his view. Abaye, Abaye said, Mina, 621, Mina, Lavasa, Tama, Ajlinan. On what basis do I say on what basis of what do I say that we follow the criteria of taste in classifying two substances of being two kinds? Actually should be Tznan, because Sanya, remember we learned the Brisa, but Tznan, because we're learning it in the Mishnah, Tavlin Shnayim, Shlosh Shemas Vehein Min Echad. In the case of a rabbin seasonings, 2 or 3 different names, and they are all of one species, Omin Shlosha, or they have 3 different species. All right, you're making a salad, you're making soup, and now you go and you put in some black pepper, and you put in some bell pepper, which are green peppers, and then you put in some jalapeno peppers. They're all peppers, but they're all different type peppers, and they have different type tastes. So asur and mitzarfin, if they fell into a pot and seasoned, well, in this case, those are kosher, but what if the ingredients were not kosher? If they fell into a pot and seasoned it, although none of the individual seasonings contain enough to season the pot on its own, the foods into which they fell are forbidden, and the seasonings combined with one another to forbid those foods. Wow, think about that. Chizkiah said in explanation of the Mishnah, the reason the 3 species combine with one another to prohibit the food in the pot is they are dealing here with various kinds of sweetness, which are considered of one kind. Let's say they're all peppers or whatever. Since they're all fit to sweeten the pot with them, having cited the Mishnah, Chizkiah's explanation to it, Abai now draws his proof. Now it's fine if you say we follow the criteria of taste in deciding what constitutes one's kind, then we can understand why the various seasons combine. Because they are all things to provide food with a single taste. But if you say you follow the name as Rava maintains, then why do the seasonings combine to one another? They each have a different name. One's jalapeno pepper, one's a red pepper, no, one's a black pepper, and one's a green pepper. Actually, it could be green, yellow, red, whenever, how mature it is. Haishma lechud v'haishma lechud. Why this one has a separate name and this one has a separate name? Rava's answer of Rav Amar, Rava would say, Hamina. The author's whose authorship is reflected in this Mishnah? He says, Rav Meir here. It's the Mishnah's author, Rav Meir, whose view is stated in the following brisa. It's interesting. How can Rav Meir make any comment on the food here? Because he was married to Bria, and she probably cooked in the kitchen. And she probably said, stay out of my kitchen. No. Anyway, no, he probably cooked because Bria was very smart. Maybe she was learning. I have no idea. Anyway, let's get back on focus. Okay, the Sanya for his learned in the Brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rav Meir. Rabbi Yehuda quotes in neighbor Rav Meir, Minayin Lako Yisur and Shabbatara Mitztafin Zemzeh. From where do we derive with regard to all prohibited items that are mentioned in Torah? They combine with one another. Oh, catch that again. All prohibited items compare with one another. So stay away from any single prohibited item because you touch this prohibited. You might say, oh, but that was prohibited. Oh, that. You know what? It's an additive effect on your mind. Lo sechol kos toeva. You shall not eat any abomination, which is expounded to mean kol sheti avti lecha. Anything that I have made abominable, it's abominable snowman, abominable, not something you shouldn't do, all right, for you is subject to this prohibition not to eat. The Gemara cites what Abai and Rava would rule in various other situations. How far I'm going? Let's officially space. Chalal go chamra. If prohibited vinegar falls into permitted wine, okay, so wine and vinegar are 2 different substances. All agree that the vinegar renders the wine prohibited only when it imparts a flavor to the wine, because they're 2 different. If, however, the prohibited wine falls into some permitted vinegar, Abai says it renders the vinegar prohibited. In other words, what if some yayin nesach wine falls into some vinegar? It renders the vinegar prohibited even if a tiny amount. Rava Amar b'nosin time, but Rava says it renders the vinegar prohibited only when it imparts a flavor to the vinegar. Abaya, let me just finish this thought. Abaya Amar b'mashal. Abaya says it renders the vinegar prohibited in a minute concentration, beginning of side B. Rechachala v'tama chamra chala, because he holds that the wine whose smell is vinegar and the taste is wine is considered vinegar. Listen, he holds that wine whose smell is vinegar and taste is wine is considered vinegar. He's saying once you're pouring the wine over vinegar, vinegar is so strong, it's now affecting in the air that wine. And that wine is now considered like a vinegar, and therefore it's the same in the same. So even though wine and vinegar were different, he's now saying it automatically became wine and kindness, same kind. Thus, it is the case of the mixture of a kind within its kind. The chomin shemino and the mixture of a kind within its kind is prohibited even by new concentration. Rabbi says, oh, it only applies when it gives a flavor. Chamra beholds the wine whose smell is vinegar and taste is wine is considered wine. And that's not min shevimino because min shevimino, a kind that's not the same kind. And the name mixture of a kind that's something that's not the same kind. The forbidden substance renders the wine prohibited only when parts of flavor to the substance. All right, we're going to stop here, but a food for thought. There's a question. When you smell something, are you really getting that substance into you? So you go by, you smell yayin nesach, all right? Did you do a prohibition? He's shaking his head. Yeah, maybe no.
It's benefit. You're smelling. It's benefit. No?
I'm not talking about benefit. Did you drink it? Because when you smell something, it's really going into your system. Why do you smell it? Now you say that. You're saying two different answers. Just be quiet for a moment, please. When you smell something, that stuff that's in the air that's going in your nose is now being absorbed into your bloodstream, and the nose goes closest to the brain, and you interpret the smell and this and that, whatever. So it's like drinking the Nesach wine. So even the smell is a very strong prohibition. So just think about it the next time you smell perfume from someone, you shouldn't be smelling their perfume because that's getting into your brain right away. And that might cause an attraction to something that's prohibited and get you in the wrong direction.
Whoa.
And with this, thank you for letting me finish today. 6:29, I got 1 minute to leave. Thank you all for listening. Well, to be continued tomorrow. Bye. Thank you. No, shut it off. Just shut it off. Bye. See you guys. See you, Josh.